Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about apple cider, milk, an Australian blogger facing charges, Venezuela cracking down on the internet, that plus a whole lot more coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to episode 150 of Free Minds TV. And as always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
That's right, Nick. We've made it through 150 episodes of this stuff. Well, I think you're up to, what, 130 something?
I didn't come on right at the beginning of the show, so I haven't been here as long as you
It's
have.
a long time, though, Nick. So 150 episodes seems like quite the mile setter. And I know that around episode 100, we said we'd be getting a set out here and actually making the TV show look a little bit more professional.
It's a weekly show, about 52 weeks in a year.
But it's coming along, right? I mean, I know people on the members section had been watching some of the progression of it coming along, and you've actually been out there working hard on it by yourself these last few days. So
I have actually been working on it.
We've been giving Nick a deadline of 2 more weeks.
And then Toby's going to mess with my graphics.
And then Nick's graphics will have his phone numbers for all you young bachelor men out there.
You didn't say anything about phone numbers.
Well, we'll see. Anyways, you want to call Nick at home, encourage him not to finish the set, and you will be able to. But anyways, we do have a ton to get into this very special episode 150. We will be getting into an article about milk and cider coming from right here in New Hampshire, actually. Some exciting stuff happening in the legislature, Nick. But first, we're going to be going all around the world. We're going to be talking about rolling blocks of cheese down hills and talking about Venezuela really trying to crack down on the internet. But first, we've got to start over with a man who lives in America being threatened by the government in Australia?
Yeah, and from what I can tell from the article, he's actually an Australian national, but he's living here in the United States, and he's running a website. Now, his website is called Encyclopedia Dramatica. It's a satire and comedy website. Obviously, it's accessible from anywhere in the world where the government doesn't block it. Looks like Australia is planning to block it here soon with the internet filtering plan they're going to put in place. But for now, you can access this website here in the US or down under in Australia. Now, the Australian Human Rights and Equal Opportunities Commission, which apparently is a government organization down there, contacted Encyclopedia Dramatica owner Joseph Evers after 20 Indigenous Australians complained about the article's content. Now, apparently there's a page, it's set up, I've never been to the website. Apparently the website's set up a lot like Wikipedia, where there are articles about certain subjects and news events. So for those who are familiar with Wikipedia, that's kind of how this website functions. Now, obviously somebody set up a page about Aboriginals on the website that Evers runs and owns, and a lot of Aboriginals didn't find it so funny. Apparently there were some very derogatory depictions of Aboriginal Australians on his website. So he's being threatened under the Racial Discrimination Act, which apparently is law on the books in Australia. And this is very similar to other legislation, to my understanding, that's on the books in many other countries outside of the United States, where hate speech, anything that's derogatory towards people of a certain race, gender, whether it's intended to be comedy or not, can be punished by either prison time or a fine. And this is something that's not all that uncommon. It takes place in Canada, takes place in Great Britain, takes place in Australia. In the United States, we are fairly fortunate that we are actually protected to a great extent by the First Amendment of the US Constitution. And you can make fun of people and hurt people's feelings and even say some pretty mean and nasty things without having to worry about going to jail.
It's true, Nick. It's very silly, isn't it? I mean, we've reported on a few of these articles. I think it was just a month or so ago we reported on an article where someone in the UK was arrested for writing an email that had a word in it that rhymed with an offensive word, and they were arrested for that. So, I mean, things are going pretty haywire in other parts of the world that really I didn't know about until recently. I've always said, yeah, the Constitution's holding back the tidal wave of a big government to a certain extent here in America, but not doing much. Apparently, that First Amendment, anyways, is actually really helping us out because Western worlds all over the place are starting to crack down on what they call hate speech and arresting people for it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Western developed countries, English-speaking countries with legal traditions very similar to our own, they simply don't have a constitution in place that actually protects your right to free expression, even when that's offensive.
It seems like a given, though, doesn't it? I mean, I guess that's just...
Well, no, there are a lot of people here in the United States who would like to see that legislation put in place.
Well, there is legislation, actually, for hate speech on bullying and stuff that's going to go through, but that would be struck down probably by the
It's very difficult to enforce a law like that in the U.S. because there are constitutional safeguards in place, thankfully.
On state levels as well as on the federal
It's
level.
not popular speech that you need to protect with something like the First Amendment because nobody goes after popular speech. You can say that puppies are cute or people are awesome. No one's going to go after you for that. It's when you go after somebody, say something mean or nasty about somebody, that somebody is going to try to come after you and pass a law saying you can't say those mean, hurtful things. Now, if you're wondering how somebody living here in the US can be charged in Australia, well, apparently this was done before when Dow Jones and Company ended up paying a mine entrepreneur, Joseph Gutnick in Australia, $580,000 in fees and damages. And that was apparently a civil case where he was saying they had defamed his character. But still, apparently,
well, that can
the
happen
legal
here
system
as well,
in Australia thinks they can go after
but
you.
you can get, I mean,
Well,
people can sue you for libel or slander here in the United States if you're spouting off all sorts of hate speech and it's not true and it's damaging their character. I mean, you can sue someone and take them to court for that. But that's different than actually being arrested for hurting someone's feelings. Now, what's interesting about this is it's on the internet. So if you don't like the content, just don't go there.
Right.
Go to a
but the
different
other
website.
thing, I mean, this should be of concern to anybody who posts anything online, even if they just say comment on YouTube videos or things like that. Because just because you're living in, say, the United States, where you do have constitutional protections in place that do safeguard your right to express your opinion, apparently it's not
I want
all
to give
that
it a try.
uncommon
Can I
for
do
other
it?
countries like Australia.
I want to try, though.
come
You
after
stupid, stupid Australians. You're all stupid. Stupid, stupid. What else can I say, Nick, to get them going? You're stupid. Is that hate speech enough? I hate you. Do I have to swear? I don't really want to swear.
I'm not sure that would actually fall under a hate
But
speech.
I want to give it a try, Nick. I want them to extradite me to Australia, the land down under.
I don't know that the U.S. is going to extradite here, and Joseph Evers is saying that his attorney has advised him that he can never, under any circumstances, return to Australian soil.
Nick, I don't think
where his family still lives.
It used to be. I used to love the idea of going to Australia. The kangaroos, man. How can you get better than that? But
they are pretty cool.
After doing this show, I hate the place. I mean, story after story after story we get there is the government just cracking down on basic human rights.
It's a pretty statist place. I mean, I know other people. I have friends who have been to Australia, some for only a few days and some for a few months. And I hear it's not a terrible place to go. It's an interesting place to visit. But in terms of the politics, it was pretty statist. I mean, it was pretty authoritarian. The state does crack down in ways that they don't here in the United States. And that's not, to be honest, I don't hold it against Australians. Australians, as individual people...
Bunch of criminals. What can they do about it?
They have no more control over what their government does than we have control over what our government does. There are plenty of policies in place that don't represent my views
millions.
in the U.S.
Millions.
Right. Our foreign policy doesn't represent my views either. So I don't want to give the impression that I actually hold it against individual Australians, because I don't. But does the state of affairs that they have going on in Australia make me more or less likely to visit? Less likely to visit. I don't want to visit a place like that. I can go to China if I want political repression.
I'm going to have to at least stay in a place that's protecting my basic human rights like freedom of speech, et cetera, et cetera. But anyways,
largely you have to stay in the U.S. for that.
It's unfortunate. I guess we are still fairly free, even though we repress and arrest innocent people every day. But
we are fortunate to live in the United States relative to most other places
in the world. Especially New Hampshire, one of the even freer places.
Right. So, I mean, relative to most of the other places in the world, the U.S. isn't a bad place to live.
But it's definitely got a lot of work to do.
Yes.
Like, tons and tons of work, because there are literally millions of horrible bad laws in the books and people's lives being destroyed and ruined every day because of them. But that's a topic for another story, because I've got to move on to this cheese rolling article, Nick. I think it's awesome. It's been going on for about 200 years. over in Britain. But unfortunately, this year it has been canceled. For nearly 2 centuries, runners and spectators have gathered on a steep Cotswolds hill for the Whitsunday cheese rolling event. The rough and tumble spectacle sees daredevil competitors chase a 7-pound wheel of double Gloucester down a 200-yard incline on one of Britain's most ecstatic traditions. But not a tradition this year. Yes, the organizers of the event said that, quote, "We have had to cancel on the advice of the police and local authorities." Now, why did they have to cancel this event? As you can see from the video that's being played,
It's a very steep hill.
It's a very steep hill, and people are literally throwing themselves down it, rolling down the hill, bouncing down the hill, breaking bones, getting lots of injuries, being carted off in ambulances. But amazingly enough, Nick, that's not why the police are having them cancel this event. They're actually canceling the event because the cheese rolling contest is gotten so enormously popular that the farm that it's been held at for nearly 200 years simply can't contain the 15,000 spectators that come and attempt to watch this. So when I first saw this article, I was like, what? These nanny staters, Nick, I'm going to rip into them on this show so much, because I watched the video and it's pretty sweet. I mean, people throwing themselves out a hill chasing a ball of cheese.
They only win the roll of the
It's a
round
7-pounder.
of cheese.
You're telling me that's not a good prize?
It is.
7 pounds of
Good-
this famous Gloucester cheese.
Yeah, it's
The
a good double Gloucester.
Not only that, but
doesn't
since
mean you're throwing yourself
1988,
down a hill for it.
since 1986, it's been all the cheese has been handcrafted by an 83-year-old Diana Smartnick. You're telling me that
I'm sure it's
win this
fabulous
prize?
cheese.
Oh, it looks.
It looks like
fabulous
fun,
cheese.
is why I would do it.
Yeah,
Not for the cheese. That's a lot of cheese to eat.
It looks pretty cool. People come dress up in all sorts of costumes and throw themselves down this hill. But it looks like for health and safety reasons, it's going to be canceled this year. They're trying to find a new location next year. They just have to find a hill that's steep enough. So, you know, I'm almost going to give a tip of a hat to these people in the UK tonight instead of ripping on them, because they didn't cancel it for the reason I thought they would. And it's actually unclear of whether the organizers were forced to do it. The police and authorities told them they recommend that they not hold it. A little bit of an iron fist, but at least it's because, well, it's been blocking up the road and causing a nuisance for anyone who wants to be around there, and not because they're saying that you can't throw yourself down a hill. Because I support the right. If I was over in the UK around this time, I think I'd have to partake. I think I'd win that cheese too, Nick.
I don't doubt it.
If you're not afraid to just literally throw yourself off a cliff for 200 yards and roll
You're a
down
much
a hill,
bigger guy than I am, so you probably
I
have
would
more
smush the
inertia going
competition.
down.
Yes, that's right. It is interesting. There's been many injuries.
It's the first one to the bottom wins, right?
Absolutely. The first time it was written about was in the 1826. It's thought to be a pagan ritual for the harvest, for the planting time, because it's not harvesting quite yet. It was in 1941 to 1954, interesting enough, they used a wooden wheel of cheese because they were rationing, and so you couldn't actually win a real wheel of cheese, but now you can, Nick. So it's amazing. Also, one last tidbit before we move on. The roll of cheese moves at 70 miles per hour. So you got to chase after it. That's pretty quick for a ball of cheese.
It is pretty quick. It's a steep hill. I mean,
looks like fun, though.
it does look like fun throwing yourself down it, but you probably get bruised.
I think that's worth winning a roll of cheese for. Anyways,
I'd
good
rather
job,
just watch
nanny
you do it.
staters. Well, you're a bunch of wimps out there. You're not wimps when it comes to chasing your cheese. All right, let's move right along, Nick, to more stuff pertinent to the United States anyways, and the federal government and this impending health care legislation. Let's get into it with the Downsizer Dispatch.
Well, yeah, and this week's Downsizer Dispatch is focusing on the fact that it's possible to win battles and still lose a war. And it does seem like people who are pushing for some kind of nationalized health care in the United States, they are winning some battles. They may get some piece of legislation passed. But overall, they're probably not going to win the war. It's not that likely that they're going to put in place a system that was quite as arduous as they had hoped, and people shouldn't give up. Just because it seems like the deck is stacked, it seems like Congress really might pass it this time, doesn't mean that you should stop voicing your objections, if you have them, to your elected officials in Washington. Contact your representatives in the House, contact your senators. Tell them that you don't want expensive government-run health care. The health care costs here, I mean, they're debating a program that the government's own numbers are saying are going to be very expensive. Usually, government programs run 2 or 3 times what the original cost is. If they're saying that this healthcare package is going to cost $1 trillion, odds are it's really going to end up costing $2 or $3 trillion. And remember that I said that because I have a feeling that if this does pass, in 3 or 4 years, we'll be reporting on how the costs have run so far over budget that they've had to levy new taxes or put in place new controls. There's a lot of concerns that people have about the healthcare system. I think we have a crappy healthcare system in the United States as it stands today. I'm not going to say that you can't get better healthcare other places around the world, but I think what we need to do in order to fix our healthcare system is to get the government out of it. Government already spends over half of the healthcare dollars spent in the US, and that doesn't mean that healthcare is less expensive for the average American. On the contrary, we have very expensive healthcare that doesn't always get the job done. Go to downsizerdc.org and see how you can make a difference.
Yeah, as you said, Nick, the depressing part about all this is even if the healthcare doesn't go through, we still lose because the healthcare system is mostly government run already, and they've really meddling in it. It's about half
government run. Just a hair over half of the healthcare dollars spent in the U.S. are government
spent. And that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about all the meddling they do, all the regulations they pass, everything they get their little fingers so deep in there, Nick, that you can't fix the system without actually chopping off the government hand and letting it.
And you have to look at the things they do that affect the healthcare system that aren't directly intervening. Well, what they've done with insurance and the tax code, so what people can write off and what they can't. Right. Businesses are incentivized to offer people insurance, to offer their employees insurance. That doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. We set up the tax code in such a way that it's incentivized businesses to provide insurance, so most people get their insurance through their employer rather than through themselves. If they lose their job, they're in a bad situation. There's a lot of things that can be done that involve less government, not more, and I think that's where the real improvements can be made.
So screwed up. I mean, this is a quote from Mark Edge from Free Talk Live, one of our sponsors. I listened on his show. He was quoted as saying, in 1960, to have a baby in the United States, counting inflation, it was about $600 to go to the hospital and have a baby.
In today's dollars.
In today's dollars. That's with inflation. $600. That's not going to buy you the wheelchair to go through the door nowadays. I mean, you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands.
And part of that is the insurance system that we have.
It's all sorts. It's the government putting their little fingers in, Nick, and getting them wiggling around in there. Do you want the government's fingers wiggling around in you? I don't. Anyways, if you have a different opinion, fmtv@freemindsmedia.org is the email address, or you can log on to our website, freemindsmedia.org, and fill out a quick little nifty email right from there without even logging into your email. Other things up there, all up at freemindsmedia.org. All right, Nick, when we come back, we're going to be talking about milk and cider and New Hampshire, as well as Venezuela and the internet. All that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is episode 150, Nick. 150 of Free Minds TV.
And you're watching Free Minds TV.
This is William from New Hampshire Underground watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to the show. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
And I would really like to just go ahead and actually thank the viewers, the listeners, for helping us out. Last week we had pleaded for you. We were ready to end the show because people had fallen off and weren't helping us out. And we were like, after 150 shows, shouldn't we be being helped out here? And a lot of you guys did. So thank you very much for helping us out. But I would also like to say, for those of you who've been watching since episode 1, it's 150 free shows we've given you. You haven't given us $1 yet? Let's just say the show's worth 1 penny to you each time you watch it. 1 penny for 30 minutes of content. It's time to give us that $1.50. You can do so at freemindsmedia.org. So even if you've only been watching for 50 episodes, that's 50 cents. We're talking 1 penny per episode. You can help us out. freemindsmedia.org. All right, Nick, we've got to get into it. When we started off this show, a lot of what we talked about was local content in New Hampshire, and I want to bring it back to that, talking about milk and cider, and what the New Hampshire legislature is doing these days. And this coming from Concord, apples are getting some competition from cows in a debate over New Hampshire's state drink. Should it be cider or should it be milk? The House will weigh in this week when it votes on a bill designating either apple cider or milk as the state drink. A lawmaker introduced the bill after a Jaffrey grade school student contacted her. Later, Guilford Elementary School students lobbied for milk to be the drink. So originally, a student from Jaffrey grade school wanted it to be cider, and then Others said, no, it has to be milk. Now, Nick, why do I care about this article? Well, it's because I think this is exactly what the legislature and our elected officials should be doing with their time. No, it's time to stop meddling in things that actually matter. It's time to stop raising my taxes. It's time to stop getting your nose in other people's business and making it harder to open a business, making it harder to own a home. Stop doing all that. Stop debating what you stupid lawmakers consider important. Stop screwing with my life and worry about milk and cider. Debate this until the cows come home, Nick. Debate this for years. You were saying maybe it should be bottled water when we were talking about this before we started the show.
Because you said we probably, whichever one we produce more should probably.
Right, you said, well, which one should it be? Well, whoever produces the most. You said, well, they produce more bottled water than anything else. Okay, let's work this into the debate. And this is what I want our legislatures to be focused on, our so-called representatives. Because I know they're not representing me in all this other crap they're shoving down my throat. Not doing a very good job at that.
Well, I mean,
so let's waste their time on stuff like this. A few years back, they made the pumpkin the official fruit of New Hampshire. We need official sweaters. We need official, all this other stuff. Maple syrup can be the official drink. That's a lot of stuff.
You say syrup?
Yeah, that's what Rick said.
Syrup.
Well, Rick in the booth wants it to maple syrup to be the official drink. Is that what, right? Yeah. Not just for pancakes? All right, he drinks this stuff. So you know what? This debate's not over. Don't stop this now. I want you guys to dedicate the next few years of time on this.
Well, a lot of people probably think we're crazy because I hear a lot of people saying we need legislators either on the state level or in Congress to actually buckle down and work together and solve all the problems of the country.
No.
But what a lot of people, I don't think they realize, is that a lot of the problems we face are actually the result of government programs that were put in place by those same legislative bodies. When government comes up with a solution to a problem, they usually make things worse. As a general rule, not every time. I'm not saying there's no area where the government has intervened and things worked out. That certainly happened. But as a general rule, when government gets involved in one area of our life, whether it's building codes or taxing us more for our own benefit, or providing what were traditionally charitable welfare services, they tend to create more problems. And the response is more spending, more programs, more taxes to try to fix those problems. But the ones they put in place to fix the original problems, well, they create new problems. So they have to put other programs in place.
Band-aid after band-aid.
Cycle. We'd be a lot better off if they did spend more time debating whether cider or milk was going to be the
or syrup or water,
drink.
Nick. This debate's not over yet. Continue. And it is interesting. You noted that a lot of what they do is what building codes do they need to put up or et
well,
cetera,
to be fair, building codes are usually done on a local level.
Okay, this is just, okay, local level. It's something that the state does, going after, I don't know, smoking in bars or whatnot. The point is, a lot of the laws they passed, they're just people like you and I who got voted in. Citizens are representing other citizens, right? So how can they be experts in anything and actually pass laws that make sense? When their field...
They could be experts in one area, but they're voting on pieces of legislation
that affect everything
right.
in every area.
Right.
So, I mean, it's asinine to think that they could do a good job. By definition, they can't.
And they're supposedly representing people and the interests of thousands of people. I mean, even in New Hampshire, which has a pretty good rate of representation, it's a state of almost 1.5 million people. We have over 400 representatives in the legislature, but that doesn't break it down.
Right.
You're representing hundreds and thousands of constituents. How can you represent each of their interests, especially when those interests don't line up? Obviously, you get a group of 10 people in a room, they're not all going to want the same thing.
And they don't even have the expertise to be voting on something that you and I have to follow. Let's say you're a lawyer and you're a representative for someone in New Hampshire. You're going to be voting on stuff that has to do with dairy farms and carpenters and all these other businesses out there that you have known nothing about. Yet you're going to vote on it and make other people follow those rules and laws under penalty of fines and jail? It makes no sense, Nick, to even think that they could do a good job passing these laws, because they're experts in maybe a field or two, maybe 3, 4 if you're really good. But if you're wasting your time being a bureaucrat, chances are your only field is knowing how to be a bureaucrat. Of course, here in New Hampshire, we have a little bit better system because it's not as many career politicians, they're more volunteers.
It's a citizen legislature, and I think we benefit from that.
But the point being, you can't be an expert in all the fields you're going to be voting on, so then therefore it's unfair to be shoving this legislation down other people's throats.
You're not going to find any argument with me on that.
Right.
I just wish they would spend more time debating things they knew nothing about, like which is a better drink, cider or
doesn't
milk.
actually affect us. You think this will,
Some
people says, well, it's the state endorsing one product over another. You really think people are going to be like,
I can sort of
in the
see
grocery store, okay, what should I drink today? I really want milk. Or do I want cider? Let me look up what the New Hampshire legislature thinks I should drink. Oh, it's milk. Well, I was going to get cider, but New Hampshire says that it should be milk, so I'm going to go with that. Come on. Waste your time doing this crap and stop bugger out of my life. All right, Nick, let's move on to Venezuela, because life sucks for them even more than it does for people here who want small
Life
government.
probably sucks a lot more for people in
Way
Venezuela.
more, because life is pretty good here. We've got this pestering government, but relatively, I do what I want. I do what I please for the most part. Pay my taxes, of
we
course.
have property and
But I get to,
nice things.
I get to come on this show and complain and complain and complain and complain and say the government sucks, the government sucks, the government sucks, and I don't get thrown in jail for it. But not so in other parts of the world. And I can even put the show on the internet and not get in trouble for it. Can even say the U.S. government sucks, then put it on the internet and not get in trouble. But I guess they don't have those rights and freedoms in other places of the world.
No,
it's very sad.
Especially not in Venezuela. Not that Venezuela is the worst country out there, but it's certainly not one of the bastions of free speech or free anything. Venezuela's President Hugo Chavez, who is criticized by media freedom groups, called on Saturday for regulation of the internet, which people are going to lambast and say, well, it's Venezuela, of course they're regulating the internet. I'd point out that countries like Australia are going to be filtering and regulating their internet. So just because this article is coming from what some people would call a developing nation or a third world nation, it doesn't mean it's not happening here in the first world where people speak English and they have the same sort of legal tradition that we do. So don't think it can't happen here in the US. Don't think it can't happen to you wherever you're listening. Just because this story is coming out of Venezuela doesn't mean politicians in supposedly free countries aren't doing the same thing. He singled out a website that he said falsely reported the murder of one of his ministers. And apparently that website is Noticiero Digital, which apparently is a political commentary site. Supposedly they posted some story that a senior minister of his, Diosdado Cabello, had been assassinated. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, maybe it was sloppy journalism, but it's a website. Overall, you're better taking your chances having some inaccurate stories being reported and just letting people be free to actually report on news and express their opinions. I think you have for the bulk of the people, you have a much happier, much more prosperous, and much freer society when people can actually honestly discuss the way they feel. You don't get very far by trying to censor things. And that's exactly what the socialist government in Venezuela is trying to do. He even said that there may have been talk of a coup d'etat on the website over a couple of times over the past couple of months, and said that that cannot be allowed to happen. Well, of course, Hugo Chavez seized power in a coup d'etat.
He's a hypocrite, Nick. But you know what? He's a bureaucrat, and they're all hypocrites. That's going to do it for us. We're out of time. If you have a different opinion, FMTV at freemindsmedia.org or freemindsmedia.org to log on to our website and get all the show content, ways to help the show, email the show, and all sorts of other stuff. We'd have more commentary on this, but we're over time. Take it easy. Have a good week.
Keep an eye on it. Going outside a bit. Keep an eye on the queue. Instructors.